Okay, real talk for a second. I know you've probably seen the headlines today. Maybe you scrolled past it on your phone. Something about Iran, something about oil prices, something about $108 a barrel. And maybe you thought, that sounds far away. That doesn't affect me. I need you to stop right there, because what happened in the last 72 hours could hit your wallet, your gas pump, and your grocery bill harder than almost anything that's happened this decade. And most people have absolutely no idea why. So let's fix that right now. 5 words from Tehran this morning may have just pushed the entire Middle East to the edge of something we have not seen in a generation. Iran has no trust in the United States. That's it. That's the statement. And those 9 words just sent oil markets into a frenzy. Stay with me, because this is bigger than you think.
Here's what you need to know, and I'm going to make this as clear as possible. You know that Iran has a nuclear program, right? Most people do. But here's what a lot of people don't know. The U.S. actually helped Iran build civilian nuclear infrastructure back in the 1950s. Wild, right? That partnership collapsed after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, and what followed was 4 decades of mistrust, sanctions, and a nuclear program that just kept growing regardless. In 2015, there was a brief window of hope, a landmark deal called the JCPOA, where Iran agreed to cap enrichment and allow inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. It worked for a while. Then 2018 happened. Trump pulled the U.S. out. Sanctions came back, and Iran, unsurprisingly, accelerated enrichment way beyond what the deal had allowed. They pushed enrichment to 60% purity. That's dangerously close to weapons-grade material. By February 2026, the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury, a major air and naval campaign targeting Iran's military. A ceasefire was reached in April. But here's the thing about a ceasefire. It's not peace, it's a pause, and that pause is now cracking.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and if you didn't catch this today, you need to hear it. President Trump just returned from a summit in Beijing. The whole point of that China trip was to get Xi Jinping to pressure Iran into a final nuclear agreement. China buys roughly 90% of Iran's oil exports. If Beijing squeezes Tehran economically, the math changes. That was the theory. It didn't work out that way. While Trump was meeting Xi at the Great Hall of the People, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi was delivering a completely different message to the world. He confirmed that negotiations over Iran's enriched uranium, 440 kilograms of highly enriched material, had hit a deadlock, not a temporary stall, a structural one. And then he said, Iran has no confidence the U.S. is negotiating in good faith. Trump, speaking from Beijing, said he was open to Iran suspending its nuclear program for 20 years. Iran's counteroffer? 5 years. That gap is not a rounding error. That is a chasm. Here's the part that keeps analysts up at night. There was a 1-page memorandum of understanding being quietly assembled, a framework to end the war, open the Strait of Hormuz, start a path toward peace. Drafted by Trump's envoys, still unsigned, still unconfirmed, still sitting on a table somewhere, going nowhere.
Are you aware of the Strait of Hormuz? Do you know that strait? Because it's one of the most critical pieces of geography on the planet right now. Approximately 20% of all the world's traded oil flows through that narrow corridor between Iran and Oman. Iran has effectively controlled transit through it since the war began, allowing limited passage, essentially holding the global energy supply chain hostage. Here's the uncomfortable truth. By traditional military metrics, Iran lost this war. Operation Epic Fury destroyed missile batteries, degraded naval assets, severely damaged air defense infrastructure. Iran's conventional military capability is a fraction of what it was. And yet, Iran has not lost its leverage, because controlling a choke point that the entire global economy depends on is a form of power that bombs can't fully destroy. Now, here's the other side, and intellectual honesty demands we acknowledge it. Iran is being asked to give up its most significant strategic asset before receiving anything legally binding in return. No signed treaty, no congressional approval of sanctions relief, no ironclad guarantee that the next American administration just won't walk away again, exactly like happened in 2018. Iran lived that experience. It's not hypothetical, it's recent history. When Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says there's no trust, he's not being dramatic. He's articulating a documented grievance.
Intelligence community assessments describe the current negotiating environment as the most volatile since the April ceasefire. The concern isn't just that talks have stalled, it's that both sides have now publicly committed to positions that leave very little room for a face-saving compromise. And here's why that matters more than most people realize. In high-stakes diplomacy, the ability of a leader to go home and declare victory is often more important than the substance of the agreement itself. Right now, neither Trump nor Iran's supreme leader Khamenei has a clear path to that moment. One chilling data point. Iran's parliament has explicitly raised the prospect of enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels if conflict resumes. That crossed a threshold no Iranian legislative body had previously crossed so publicly. The IAEA reported just this month that Iran's enriched uranium stockpile has hit record levels. The weapons that weren't used in Operation Epic Fury, the underground nuclear sites at Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo, were deliberately excluded from the strike package, are now the exact reason a deal hasn't been signed.
Let's bring this home, because I know some of you are thinking, okay, this is a geopolitical drama. Why does this matter to me right now, today? Brent crude, $108 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate approaching $103. That's a nearly 2.5% surge in a single session based on one press conference. JP Morgan analysts have warned explicitly that a prolonged disruption to Strait of Hormuz transit cannot be absorbed the way a temporary shock can. If this standoff extends through the summer, and the current trajectory suggests that's entirely plausible, gasoline prices in the United States could approach or exceed record levels. Home heating costs entering winter would follow. And it doesn't stop at the gas pump. Global fertilizer supply chains run through Gulf ports that are still disrupted. Food security analysts have quietly raised alarms about shortages affecting tens of millions of people across South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, regions that had absolutely no role in this conflict. This is already costing the world, right now, in oil prices, in food costs, in strategic distraction, in the slow erosion of the framework that prevents regional wars from becoming global ones. Here's where we stand today, May 15th, 2026. Two possible paths forward. Scenario 1, controlled de-escalation. Back-channel negotiations through Pakistani and Omani mediators produce a narrow but workable agreement. Iran accepts a 12 to 15-year enrichment moratorium in exchange for partial sanctions relief. The uranium stockpile transfers to a third country, potentially Russia, as a custodial arrangement. The strait reopens, markets stabilize. Crisis managed, not resolved, but managed. This is possible. It requires both sides to accept outcomes neither can fully celebrate publicly. That's precisely what makes it difficult. Scenario 2, cascading escalation.
The ceasefire collapses. Iran announces enrichment to weapons-grade threshold. The U.S. resumes military operations. Israel launches independent strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. The strait closes completely. Oil surges past $130 a barrel. Global recession risk enters every serious economic forecast. Not inevitable, but every day this deadlock holds, its probability increases. Watch the next 72 hours closely. Watch whether Iranian mediator contacts in Muscat or Islamabad signal renewed flexibility. Watch whether Trump's language shifts from pressure to incentive. Watch for any IAEA announcement, because a surprise move in either direction could reshape this overnight.
Here's the truth. History doesn't always give you a warning before it turns. It announces itself exactly like this, with a foreign minister's carefully chosen words, with a silent oil market surge, with a summit that ended without the agreement the world needed. You're watching one of those moments right now. If this story matters to you, and the price of gas, the stability of global markets, and the question of whether this conflict expands or contracts should matter to every single person watching, then subscribe to this channel now. Hit the notification bell, because when this breaks, in whatever direction it breaks, you will want to know the moment it happens. We'll be here.